In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The sixth Sunday after Trinity, which we celebrate today, in its Gospel taken from the Gospel according to Thomas, has a number of metaphors, some of which are slightly different from each other in terms of their meaning, and so I will refer to them from the text. The first one is where Mary asked Jesus, "Whom are thy disciples like?" And he says they are like a bunch of little children who are in a field which is not theirs. And when the owners of the field come, they say and ask them, "Hey, release unto us our field." The children take off their clothes before them to release it to them and to give back their field to them. So let me comment on that one for a minute. I am often tempted to fantasize, and that's probably what all it is a fantasy, that St. Francis of Assisi had somehow had access to the Gospel of Thomas, because that's exactly what he did. When he was a young man, he began to devote himself to God and no other things. His father, who was a cloth merchant in Assisi, had demonstrated with him, "Look, here you are, you don't work, you don't make any money, and everything, all you're running around about God." I mean, I'm paraphrasing his words, of course. I don't think a good Italian man, even in Assisi, would say that. But you know, even the clothing that you wear is of my materials that I sell, and yet you won't come and work for me. So St. Francis stood in the middle of the plaza in Assisi, took off all his clothes, right down to what in America they call buck naked, and there he stood and he said, "Here, Father, here is your stuff that belongs to you." And he walked away naked. Now, you know, one wonders whether maybe he hasn't heard these words, but let's say the symbolism is quite evident. And so what are we really dealing with here? You know, we are, according to the Gnosis, we are strangers in a strange land. And those of us who are a little bit sensitive to what's going on, I think can testify to that. Some of us maybe more than others. Those of us like myself were exiles, lived in many different countries, exiled from my original country. It's a very natural idea to us. Yeah, sure, I'm a stranger, and now I'm a stranger in another country, and then in another one again. And this, let's say, an element of that conviction remains with us always. The deeper meaning of that being that we are beings, souls, spirits of another realm, of another dimension, who for a variety of reasons which are too many to try to figure out, and then we don't know whether our figuring out will be accurate or not, have found ourselves here. But one thing is sure, that this place is not ours, and we don't really belong to it. That doesn't mean that we can't do various things here. Primarily, I would say that we can try to enjoy ourselves, because one can enjoy oneself in a foreign country too. I've done it. Maybe I'm a little bit old to do much of it now, but I've done it. It was fun. One can live in the strange land. The important thing is to remember that this is not only a race. The important thing to remember is that we do come from an ineffable greatness, and that is our true home, and that's where we aspire to return. And if we keep that in mind, then we can do what is required. We can make a living, we can have some fun, we can do this, that, and the other things, but always remembering that we belong really to somewhere else, and that is where we are going to go, and that is what we aspire to. That is really the attitude of the Gnosis. It's no matter what people mistakenly assert, that was also the attitude of the great and wondrous prophet Mani, whose picture looks down at us now from what is sort of the altarpiece, and for that matter I might just interject that says, well, are you Manichaeans? And the answer is yes, we are Manichaeans, we are also Marcionites, we are also Valentinians, we are also Sethians, what else is there? All the rest. Why? Because our orientation to the Gnosis has always been a truly ecumenical one. We try to address ourselves to the central message and to the central practices of the Gnosis, and we don't worry about the details. Those details are legitimate for the scholars to worry about. Why? Because they're scholars. They have to do those things. They have to address themselves to details. They write books about the details, and most importantly, they get grants for writing about the details, if they're lucky. Obviously, that's a different matter. But there is obviously a central keynote, a central message, which one could outline in several statements of the Gnosis, which is common everywhere, right down to the latest of the great messengers, who was the prophet Mani. This is, and always has been, our position, because in this manner we can convey the essence of the tradition, and the details of which vary from age to age and from country to country. But this is certainly one of the essential features, is the nature and the origin of the human spirit as being in the divine fullness, and not here. Now, there in Gospel of Thomas, the Lord uses a few other metaphors. He says, therefore I say, if the Lord of the house knows that the thief is coming, he will stay awake before he comes, and will not let him dig through into the house of his kingdom to carry away his goods. Now in this case, we are the Lord of the house, of our own life, of our own ego, and so forth. And if we know that the inimical forces of this world, its distractions, its temptations, and all of those things are impinging upon us, then we have to take certain defensive measures so that the thief will not enter our fortress and will not carry away our strength, our good spirit, our good nature, maybe our good humor, our happiness, as indeed the world always will. And that, as you all know, and certainly I know, is a difficult task, because constantly almost, shall we say, the thief is breaking into our house and is trying to confuse us and mess us up, make us sad, make us angry, make us nervous, all that sort of thing, especially when we have to move from one place to another, as we did now. I mean, the thief has come into my house many times, and that made me very miserable. However, I hope that I'm sort of pushing him out by the door now, and he's not going to come again, and I hope the same is true of you. But see, this has to do with the fact that while the previous metaphor had to do with the overall condition as to where we are and where we come from, this one indicates that we have to guard the sovereignty of our soul, of our psyche, and not allow it to be invaded by influences and keynotes that are inappropriate and that will make us feel miserable and that will take us away from the purpose of our lives. Very, very important. So then he adds to it, you then must watch for the word. Gird up your loins with great strength, lest the brigands find a way to come to you, because they will find the advantage which they expect. So the brigands are the extraneous forces. And you know, they are everywhere, and maybe in some ways they are a little more intrusive now than they have been before, although it's a matter of opinion, of lifestyle, because there they are on television, there they are even more so on the computer screen, and they are constantly bringing to us what our dear Father Lafferty, God rest his soul, who would be so happy to see us here installed in such a nice way. Father Michael Lafferty always insisted, all of these things are distractions. He says they are distractions. Well, because they distract us, they pull us away from the real. Oh, so let's worry about Iraq. Oh, let's worry about this, let's worry about that. Let's worry about the latest demonstration somewhere. I'm sort of using the lingo of the preachers on Sunday night. Yeah, but sure, you can pay attention to those things, but just look how they distract you from good things, nice things, godly things, whatever you want to call them. Even if you just have a nice, enjoyable book of whatever kind, good detective story or whatever at home. It's far more worthwhile to read that than to get excited about what is going on in the world, especially since all you can do is get excited, you can't do anything about it. Now, if you were a head of state or some, God forbid, that would be the real mess, or something like that, then you might be able to try to do something about it, but none of us can. All we can do is become unhappy and gripe. And that's not a very productive activity. And so we have to be careful not to allow these brigands that come to us from outside to distract us from the important thing, which is really to realize who we are, realize where we came from, try to aspire to our true and wonderful destiny, and in that conviction and with that activity to be reasonably happy. This is very important. And so we have to be on guard against these influences and not give in to them and be influenced greatly. And then he says, the very last metaphor is a nice one, and it has a little different keynote. Let there be among you a man of understanding. When the fruit ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand, he reaped it. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. And this has to do with the timing of our interior experiences. There are times when the fruit has ripened, when we are ready for more gnosis, when we are ready for more understanding, when we are ready for more greater closeness to the divine. And that's the time that we should take advantage of, because it doesn't come all the time. In fact, unfortunately, it tends to come rather rarely. And so that's when we have to seize the moment, carpe diem, as the Romans said, seize the day and take advantage of it. But if you say, oh well, yeah, but first I have to pay my bills, and I have to balance my checkbook, and I have to call Uncle Joe, whom I haven't talked to in 2 days, and Aunt Fanny, and whatever the case may be, all kinds of things. Right? By the time you do all of that, time may have passed. And then You don't know when it will come again. So you see the opportunity to be close to the Spirit, the opportunity to be close to the real meaning, as Carl Jung would call it. Those opportunities are tremendously precious, and they are relatively rare. And this is really where discernment comes in the Sanskrit, here in the theosophical atmosphere, so some of the Sanskrit words come to me. It is called vairagya, which is discernment. You have to discern, you have to discriminate in that sense to know, oh, this is important, this is an important time. And this particular insight that I'm about to have, this opportunity that I have for further insight is important, and it is precious, and I will take advantage of it. And the other things, I will take care of them in due course. So, priorities, the divine, the spirit, spiritual meaning, transformation, these should have priority. Now, they don't have priority in the world. If you tell it to most people that that's what you're concerned about, they are going to say, depending on what language they speak, that you are Meshuggah, or that you are un fou in French, or whatever. Why? Because the wisdom of God is foolishness in the sight of the world, as has been said. But we have to know what is important, and we have to address ourselves to it, and we have to have that sort of fine sense, whatever one wants to call it, or the other ear or the other sight where we say, aha, now there it is. Now I will address myself to it, and I will follow it. And whatever it is, I'll turn off the stove, because otherwise your food might be burnt, which is not a godly act. And put other things aside. Try to address myself to this. Now, of course, it's not always that possible. You have a job, as I did for many years. My principle was for decades upon decades to work and to support the church with my earnings. After I was ordained a priest, few years into that, every year with my tax return, I bought another set of vestments. So 4 years' time, I had them all, white and purple and red and green and eventually black. So, but even then, there are things that we have to do, but it doesn't mean that they have to, these circumstances and activities have to govern us. There should always be a little door, a little window open to the higher, so that when it comes, oh yes, there it is. And that can be done, and it can be done without any great trouble and to the detriment of any part of our activities. But we have to have the priority. Because really, one could quote innumerable statements, what profiteth a man if he wins the whole world? And that's not what we are here for. And believe you me that if you have this kind of priority, you are not going to be the loser. It will be to your advantage. Because the closeness to the divine, the ability to listen to the voice within, envelops and irradiates the rest of your life. And whatever you do will be illumined by that. Well, if you don't do any of it, then there cannot be any other result but darkness. Now, there's always some darkness around because that's the nature of this world. But it can be minimized. Why? By being close to the light. And it can be handled in that manner. So these are the sort of things that the Lord Christ tells us in these particular passages of the Gospel of Thomas, and I think that they need to be taken to heart and need to be kept in our minds and to remind ourselves, because the intrusions, the difficulties, the distractions will always come, and they have to be kept at bay, they have to be repelled. They don't go away on their own, they have a life of their own, and they just love to come in like psychic parasites to eat our spirit. But of course, there are details too, but then would take too long to go into the details now at this time. But maybe one of the details is that our mind, our orientation should be as free as possible from selfishness, from self-seeking things. And this is where we have what a Tibetan teacher of some years ago used to call spiritual materialism. You know, we have people who say, yeah, if you meditate on this, if you make this kind of affirmation, then you're not going to be sick, then you're not going to be poor, then you're not going to be unhappy. What's behind all of this? Moi, I want to be free of this. You know, that I don't care what New Age or old age or old hat teacher tells you that the New Age now is old hat. That is not right. You have to cleanse your orientation in that fashion. The power of the Spirit is not here, does not come to us in order to benefit our ego and its recollections. My teacher, Bishop Palatin, who consecrated me a bishop, was one to say, if you want to have money, and we need it for various things, you work for it. You do what ordinarily brings money. Don't try to tell God to give you money. That's not what He does. He's not concerned with that. He's not a God of money. He's a God of other things. You, on the other hand, are the one who can handle those things. That doesn't mean that you are not deserving of some strength, you are not deserving of some help, even in those areas, but only up to a certain point. So you have to be careful to disentangle your wants and your needs and your spiritual needs. And it can be done. It just really requires a little thoughtfulness, a little sitting down, a little addressing yourself to these matters, and then it can indeed be done. So we have all of these metaphors from Thomas's Gospel this time, and maybe we want to keep them in mind and translate them into our own circumstances, and when we do so, I think we will be very much better off for it. So our activities here now, God will continue. We will have our Friday lectures have started. We have a very good audience, and will continue this time. And of course, our services will continue. And I'm very happy that you're here, and I'm very happy to be here myself. And so in the mystery of that which hangs between heaven and earth, descend upon us, and remain with us always,